So here's another video tutorial. What we're going to look at today is setting up a template save as file. The one I'm going to do today is going to be oriented towards kind of schematic design, like early 2D design work. This same kind of idea can be applied to different representational types. So like for me, for instance, I have one for later stage, more detailed drawings. I have one for fabricating models. You can do them for 3D, for 2D. But again, for this one, we're going to look at how to set one up for kind of like early concept and into kind of early 2D schematic design. So I'm going to just start with a completely blank Rhino file. I already have these set up, but I'm right in this going through the process of showing you guys how to actually create these and what are some of the important tools that you're going to want to get set up in certain settings. So here it comes slowly. But yeah, let's give it a moment. I mean, you can see one of the ones I am regularly using right here, actually, as well as here and here and here. You can see a hatched library is another recent thing I use. But so this is not the way I normally open Rhino. Normally, I am in my folder opening one of these template files that I'm today showing you how to make, and then basically doing a save as of that with like a more relevant title. So this is, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. This is the view that we're kind of confronted with when we first open Rhino. We have the different views, basically the basic layout, and I'm assuming you guys have all kind of opened Rhino before. If this is really the first time, check out my kind of real like opening Rhino for the first time overview video. So I am assuming you guys have at least some familiarity with kind of the different views, some of the different panels. But for this one, because we're going to be working 2D, we want to be in top view. So I'm just going to like bring us here to start. We have this grid that we'll deal with in a moment. But before doing that, really the first thing I like to do, just so I don't forget it, is basically inputting the correct units. So I will just type units, and that brings us to the document property page. Rhino is automatically, I think default is in millimeters. So for my purposes here, which is a template file for a architectural building, I tend to set mine in feet. Because that's a larger increment, I will add 1 to the absolute tolerance, and I like to just add 1 there. And then rather than decimal, I like to work in feet and inches. I think this is kind of the best of both worlds. If the object or the thing you're measuring is large, it will show it in feet. If it's smaller than a foot, it will show it in inches. Display precision, this is a little bit preference. I tend to model or draw basically I don't kind of, I won't draw lines or create surfaces that are less than 1/8, or I really try to avoid doing that if I'm working like on a building. But if you bump up the display precision 1, it will basically, I use this as a way of telling like when my model is getting funky. Because basically, if all the lines you're drawing are no less than, are in increments no less than 1/8 inch, if at any point you do a dimension and it shows, 1/16 of an inch, often there's something kind of funky happening, and can be worth it to check it out. So this is all kind of changed for now. I like to do this just right off the bat because it's easy to forget, and it kind of has funky, it can create kind of funky things down the line. The next thing I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna save this because this is the first time saving it, and because I'm working on the actual, because I'm working on the template itself. I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna fully save this. So anytime you're modifying your template, you do save. But I like to have save as in the title because normally I'm opening this and just basically immediately saving it as whatever my new project is called. For this, I usually start out with XXX or 6X's. This is kind of dependent on what kind of labeling and file organization structure you use. Personally, my office, we have project numbers that will contain like the year and then the number of what number project that is in the year, which is also kind of how we bill. But I know a lot of people that, and particularly, you know, in school or whatever, like I know a lot of people that have 6 digits here, and basically this is like 250910. So will kind of, when they do the save as for the new project they're starting up, it will kind of be coded to the date. I'm gonna just stick with this one, and we're gonna call this generic generic 2D save as template. And again, this final thing is like a reminder for myself, and I delete when I do actually properly do that save as. Generic 2D is just like what, you know, this will be kind of replaced with more specificity on the project that you're kind of opening up. But yeah, so great. I have that title set up. The next thing I want to get set up is are my panels. For me, at this stage, I think it is. There are 2 that you absolutely have to have that I'm using all the time. One of them is layers, which is already shown here. The other one is properties. And so properties, you know, again, refer to the other video that really lays out, or just kind of walks you through opening Rhino for the first time. I'm often kind of navigating between the 2 of these, where, you know, you have a line. This bottom one is how you kind of control the characteristics of the lines you're working with, like globally. And this is how you kind of understand the object that you're looking at kind of more locally. It just like provides more information too. Nicely, this is not always the case, but kind of, you know, I think this might look a little bit different for you guys when you open it up. It might not be a black background, whatever. Another one I find helpful to have up. So if this did not pop up for you guys here, display, I think, is really helpful for this kind of initial setup. And some kind of things to note here is this background color. I personally like drawing with a black background, and what that means is all of my layers cannot be black. And so the reason I like it is because it's easy on my eyes, and I have very kind of distinct layers that I'll set up in a moment, which, you know, I've used for so long, and, you know, gradually for you guys too, you'll start kind of whatever you kind of start using as these defaults, as your own defaults, you'll start to kind of recognize. For me, you know, I have red as my cut line, so that always kind of like jumps out at me. But regardless, you know, this could be another color. I know people that this is definitely a preference thing. You know, if this was a drawing that we expect to, or a template that we expect to like eventually, if we wanted to do a little bit of double duty and maybe we will be doing some modeling off of it, it is, I do often change this to ghosted and then just change that here. And what that means is, say, we make, or actually, I'll show this in a moment, but it basically means if you are kind of navigating between 2D and 3D, it's kind of it's a more clear way of viewing 3D objects than wireframe, in my opinion. But yeah, okay, so the next thing I want to look at is how to get rid of this grid. So I'm, for a moment, this is, not like really this is a 2D drawing, but just so I can kind of show you guys what's happening here a little bit more, I'm going to orbit into kind of a perspective view. So you can see here we have, this is what is kind of automatically on the page here. This is a grid that's laid out that you can kind of change the increments on, as well as this, axes, I think it is, that shows, the basic axes of your model space. Personally, I don't like this at all. So personally, I get rid of this. I think it's very kind of visually dominant and basically never helpful. If you need to create a grid, I think it's more helpful to like actually lay that out in line work that you can kind of snap to. So maybe have that as a separate layer if your project really needs a grid. So one of the first things I do, so I'm going to snap back to top view. One of the first things I do is get rid of this grid. So I'll go grid command and then H. So because right now it's showing grid, I also want to turn off show grid axes. So that is O, enter. Great, it's gone. And so you'll notice if I kind of snap back to that view, I'm really just modifying the settings in top view. But when I am doing these 2D drawings, this is where I'm living. I'm really kind of staying in this viewport. Great. I'm going to save that, not save as, because I'm saving modifications I've made to the template itself. But yeah, great. So grid is off. The next thing I want to talk about, just briefly, but is the aliases. This is definitely something that's covered in a different video in more detail. But just as a reminder, that is another thing that I will kind of modify in these save as templates. Here, to be perfectly honest, I forget how, I think there are ways of changing the kind of default of when you open up Rhino, like what kind of aliases or certain settings that will appear. For my purposes, these are ones that I really comment. The reason these are on here and in this kind of global anytime I'm opening up Rhino is that a lot of these are the tools that are like I'm using no matter what kind of drawing it is. There's some that are a little bit more 3D specific, but basically in my template save as that I've already created for 3D work, I have more that are specific to 3D modeling. So again, look back at that video. You can I kind of go into detail on the ones that I use a lot, but this is something you guys should all get really familiar with your hotkeys and kind of spend time thinking about and kind of tailoring them to how you work, like what the actual aliases are, all that. But take a look at that other video to kind of see a good starting point where I kind of talk about all these and the way you modify them. You can just click into the line. You can add new ones. It's great. So, you know, if I had done a bunch of modification to that, we'd do another save. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about and do here is getting my layers set up. So for that, we're going to just pull this over so we have a little bit more visibility. We have all these options on for each kind of like for each layer. Basically, I'm just going to give you guys a few that I think are, helpful for initial design work. You might find you work slightly differently, and so these can definitely be tailored as needed. You may feel like there's not really one that you're not going to be using of the ones I give you, but you might find that like for your own working, it makes sense to maybe add a couple other ones. So what I'm going to do, pay attention to this, which is I think a great trick, is using numbers in the naming conventions. And so I'm going to do cut, I'm going to do heavy, I'm going to do mid, I'm going to do light, I'm going to do hidden, I'm going to have a no print layer, which I normally have at the very end at 99. And I'll also throw in a text layer. And so what's great, so I also have this default still. But what's cool about this is that, this naming convention, is that if you click here, it kind of resorts according to, alphabetically, but in these cases, these numbers are kind of treated before the, like alphabetic characters. It kind of does these in order. There's kind of a distinction I have here. This is at least how I work, is that basically you can see these layers are organized. This is not like organized by material. It's not organized by architectural element. It's really organized by the character of the line. So cut will be the kind of heaviest like line that cuts through material that we have talked about in lectures, and will be in a line weighting tutorial for more kind of detail on these different lines. Heavy is a darker line, often for like the outline of buildings and elevation you can use, or kind of big features that you need to call out. Mid is a good kind of generic, that's how I will draw like maybe counters from above, or features I want to kind of to stand out, but not necessarily as heavily, obviously not being cut through. Light is a pretty faint material, often like material or kind of pattern or texture layer. Hidden will be the only non-continuous line. I'll make that dashed. Text is self-explanatory. It's when I have text, in this kind of at this level of a project, like early conceptual work, I really just have a text layer, and we'll put kind of like symbols or other things in that. But you could also have like a key layer if that's helpful. So like being able to toggle on or toggle off, architectural symbols that like orient the viewer, helps them navigate between different drawings, like our section lines or elevation targets, or stuff like that. You could have as a distinct layer. No print is a useful one for basically just putting reference line work that is useful for kind of assembling your drawing, but not, you don't want to show up on the print. But I'll kind of show these a little bit more as I make them more specific. But here, I'm gonna actually really pull this over here. So you'll notice there's two kind of color markers. This color here, this is basically noting the color that will appear in model space, and the print color is obvious. This is what it's actually being printed as. And that's both, you know, if I almost, anytime that it says print in Rhino, I like to think of that as like export. So if you're like printing to PDF, you're kind of exporting it into a PDF, that's the color that it will appear as. And these can be different. That's what's great. So I'm going to assign the ones that I like using. So I like red, purple, blue, green, or actually I like this other, where is it? It's like, I just don't like that poison so much, so I'll pick something just like up there. Hidden, I do orange usually. Text, I'll do like light gray, maybe a little bit more. No print, I do cyan. This is just what I use. And then default, I do as kind of a dark gray. I think what's nice, basically default, I didn't talk about that, but the default line work is if I'm, you know, if I'm, say, tracing over a bunch of information, and I just like, I'm trying to get lines on the page, or, you know, if I'm bringing a bunch of line work in from a make 2D of a 3D model in another file, I usually send it to default. And the reason for that is I'm not kind of confused. I know that that line work has not been line weighted yet. When it is in, you know, when I see it as kind of red or purple or blue, I know that I have kind of given it attention to that line and made sure that it is in the correct layer. So it's just kind of a trick for myself. And then, so yes, we have our model space line set up here, but we want to change all these to black, with one exception. This guy I will have as a light gray. This could be black, this could be whatever you want, so long as this is no print. The gray here, I'll explain. I sometimes find it helpful if I'm making an outline of a drawing that shows kind of the extent of the paper size, to have this as a light gray and just print it at a very low resolution, or very low print width, because there are certain export types that basically will, you know, they will just kind of like zoom to like wherever the nearest line work is. So it's kind of a trick. Yeah, ignore, this is maybe more in the weeds, or I'll cover in another video why I made this gray, or just ask me if you're curious. Rest, great, these are continuous. However, this guy wants to be hidden. We'll tweak the scale of that in a second when we get the lines out. But for now, that's great. So I'm going to be in default just when I draw these initial lines. But actually, before doing that, let's just make a dumb little box that's our pretend building, so we know about, you know, how large to make this other stuff. So I'm going to make a rectangle. Let's call it a 10 by 10 shed, because we've been doing a lot of those in tutorials recently. 10 by 10. So this is just like helpful for us to, you know, orient the scale of what we're looking at. Actually, let's make, I'm sorry, we're going to actually make this a, I'm going to scale 1D. I want to make this like more house size, so we'll go like, call it 50 feet, and will go 30 feet. Great. This is actually our building. And just to give it a little bit more clarity, I'm going to offset that inside by 6 inches. There's a kind of wall thickness. Great. There is our, and actually, sorry, last thing, I promise. I'm going to copy and place. I'm going to move this by 1.5 feet, and I'm going to move this by negative 1.5 feet, and there is our door. Okay, so here is our building. Great. So what the lines that we're going to create for this and the kind of symbols are, it's not actually, like, the scale of them does not exactly matter. They're just kind of a back of house tool for us. But the reason I drew this is just generally to like have it be somewhat compatible or just like easy to view with the kind of scale of project that we're working on. You know, it doesn't really matter for this save as, because, you know, if you open up like this, I'm going to delete from at the end for the template, but this is just kind of a reference for me right now. But basically, if you were to open this up and you have all the line work and the north arrow and stuff that we'll make, you could just, maybe that's grouped, and you can just scale that whole thing to better match the kind of size of building you're working on. But yeah, let's create some lines first of all. So what is this? That's 7 feet. Let's make these lines 5 feet. So I'm going to start just, so it's kind of a known point. There's a 5-foot line. I'm going to take it and I'm going to move it 10 feet off. Like, it doesn't have to be exact, but just, I do like to model as precisely as possible. This was 5 feet. Let's copy that with the FUS command. Let's bring it, say, 2 feet down. Let's go 1 foot. Great. Looks a little better. And wait, oops. Copy 1 foot. Enter, and then we're going to do FUS, and we're going to get all the lines we need. How many lines is this? This is properties, 10 lines, so we can delete 2 lines. Okay, so here are lines. So the most slow, basic way of kind of changing line work, we go up, our first line is that cut, we go to the properties, we change that to cut, we go to this one, we change that to heavy, go to this one, we change that to mid. Great, great, great. We're doing these. But basically the reason that I'm creating these lines in the first place is to save yourself from having to work this way when you're using a model. This is default good. Or sorry, when you're drawing. So now that these are set up like this, say that I want to change the, here I'm going to split, and then I'm going to select both of these, and so now these are separate. We're going to go here, here, and we're going to join these. So this is continuous. Great. So say I want to change this whole perimeter to a cut line. The slow way of doing that is, yes, I'm here, then I, go over here. But now because we have these lines living here, we can just select this, EF match face, done, or match layer, done. And then for these, say this inner one, we want to be a light line because it's just kind of a threshold. So that gets this green, and this outer one actually steps down a foot, pretend, so that gets a blue. Done. Great. And so when you have it's just faster, basically. This is just a speed thing. I'm going to move these actually by another 10 feet. Is that? Yeah, 10 feet. So I'm going to show also this kind of no print, which is helpful. But basically, So I'm going to go into the no print layer, I'm going to make a rectangle. All the outputs for this class are in that 11 by 17. But just to show you guys how you would use the no print, you know, say we want to have column V. Say we want to have column lines at. Let me make this a little larger. Every 1 foot, or I don't know. That's not good actually. Let's go every. I think we did the initial building from the outside. Let's see. Yeah, 50 feet. Let's go every 10 feet. So copy in place. Copy in place, and then I'm going to do this one. We're going to go 10 feet, and then I'll copy, boom, FUS, boom, boom, boom. I think I maybe duplicated. No, that's good. So say, yeah, okay, this is some thing that we're using as kind of a reference point for drawing structure or some other kind of division within this project. It can be used for that. That's great. And so when I print this, these lines will not appear on the print, but it gives me something to say, oh, maybe I want to have, you know, columns that are centered on these that are 1 foot, and great. And then these will be that material. It allows you to like quickly kind of in an organized way set up geometries or relationships within your project. But the other big use of this no print is that we can go, again, we're doing 11 by 17 outputs, but this could be any paper size. We're going to do, 17 inches and 11 inches. And so this is 17 inches and 11 inches. This, we're drawing at kind of the full scale of the building. So this is 50 feet by 30 feet. The doorway is like a, typical 3 feet. And this paper is exactly the same size as the paper we're printing on. So obviously, if 1-to-1, this obviously does not, the paper would have to be a lot bigger, or the building would have to be proportionally a lot smaller. So the scaling we can do for that is we go scale, so the full kind of not scale 1D, not scale 2D, scale, which scales in kind of all the dimensions. I'm going to click a corner, and then I'm going to type in 12. And so now if we were to pull this over here, 1 foot in this model would be 1 inch in this. When this is printed at the 11 by 17 paper size. But to get the whole building, let's increase that again. And so I'm gonna, basically whatever I multiply it the second time by, that number is the denominator in the inches fraction. So stay with me for a second, but I'm gonna modify that, or I'm gonna enlarge this by 8. It's a little big. Okay, let me try that again. Rather than 8, we're gonna enlarge this by 4. Yeah, that's closer. That's would probably be a better print. So I'm gonna move this, and I'm gonna center it over our. I don't know why this is. Okay, and so just to show you guys, if I print this, we have the paper size that we initially drew at exactly 11 inches by 17 inches. We go, and I'm going to do black and white just because, but we're going down, we're going to go window. Boom, enter. And so now, basically, this is used as kind of a guide for for setting the window of what your print display will be. This will be printed at, oh wait, I accidentally zoomed here. See, that can sometimes happen where you accidentally scroll here, but I'm going to do that again. So that is weird. I might be doing something funky. I'll check on this, but basically this should be that. I don't know why exactly that was not. But regardless, this no print is a guide. The kind of rule, these lines here do not show up in the final print. Great, we could print this and it would appear as a PDF. Okay, great, we kind of talked about that. I'm gonna save, just be careful. The other things that I want you guys to have for this save as template are a north arrow. So here we're just gonna throw, you guys can, this does not have to be how it looks, but you need some kind of north arrow that you're going to be using on kind of the rest of your projects moving in this class moving forwards. I'm going super generic here, but let's just do like, I don't know, one, it's a little too small, go 2 feet, let's just call it that. And so the most kind of generic way to draw a north arrow, or the way I like to do it, I don't know, you can do it any way you want, but it just has to indicate north. I like this kind of circle because it kind of refers to the compass, and it's pretty easy to rotate depending on the orientation of your project. This could be a good moment for like a symbol layer, but I'm just gonna go like this. I'm gonna go, and I have the north slightly darker than the surrounding. I'll group that just so I don't accidentally grab part of it. The final thing that we're gonna, or there's a couple more things, but next we're gonna put in scale. So we're gonna go text, and for this, because remember we made this scale at 1 foot equals 1/4 inch, because we multiplied it by 12. We multiplied the paper by 12 and then by 4. We're gonna go 1 foot equals. We could write 1/4 inch because that's what we did here, but because this is a save as template, we will do 1/x inches. So it's a kind of fill in the blank. Also note though here that like the text, there is not kind of any default settings put into the text. This is currently like to the left. It is oriented towards the top, which will be like where you grab it from. It's this Arial. So I'm gonna put this down, but just, but basically I want to modify I want to modify the actual character of the text. So you can also, again, do this through document properties. but basically I will modify this stuff to the, similar to how we would, set up standards for line work and our kind of print settings, which we still have to do the final settings here, but we can do the same to text. So just because this is what I like working with, I go DM mono, but this can be, whatever you guys like. For the text, I personally like having the default be centered in both axes. And the reason for that is it's easier if you have to kind of change the scale of the text for different drawings to not have to like change the location of where that text is. Just scales around the center rather than if it's scaled over here, you have to move it across. So that's my the way I work. And then this we're throwing into this text layer down here. So yeah, this was one thing we kind of forgot, or I forgot to cover, but we did the colors so great. When we saw that test print, it showed up as black as desired, but the line weights were not input. So this is something you'll definitely have to play around with. As a starting point, you can just go 5 for a cut line. We can go 3 for a heavy line. 1/8 I think is fine for a generic line. I'm going to go 0.08 for a light. Getting any lower than 0.08 does not really work that well in Rhino. So if you really want to make it disappear, you can also kind of change this from a black to like a dark gray or a gray. For hidden, I tend to do a little bit kind of in between my mid and my light line. For text, I think it's fine to leave on default. And then default, I'll have as like 25, just so it is pretty clear that it hasn't been tweaked. And then it's great. So this is like a starting point. I would say this is definitely something that like you guys are gonna have to refine for yourselves, and you can do that by just like frequently printing your drawing, like not necessarily physically printing, but just all the time. Like you should not be looking at how to like, oh, do I need to like tweak these settings? Of course we could go to print display, state on, and change the display background to white. And roughly, this gives us an idea how it would print. I would say that Rhino is particularly bad at like showing the kind of distinction between different line weights. Illustrator is better at that, but really the best way to do it is to frequently for yourself, especially as you're working out what you want your standards to be, is to print to PDF and view it at the full size in a PDF. And so I'm going to change this back because I don't like it. So we're going to go S. Okay, so we're back. Great. So an initial kind of go at the print width. The one thing you guys may notice that's a little funky here is that I'm going to save again. The one thing that's kind of funky here is, hey, I thought we specified this as a hidden line. If we zoom in a ton, it is a hidden line, but it's not at a scale that's kind of coherent or makes sense for this drawing. And so the way to tweak that, we can go back to document properties up through the menu, or just do my units trick, which brings us into it. You go line types, And basically you can set the scale separately for different ones of these line types. To be perfectly honest, I've never really understood the inches because it seems to, when I set whatever, however you're modifying, I guess it tells you whatever. Basically, what I'm trying to show right now is that, like, we could bump this up to say 50. Great. You know, that for this drawing is, I think, will be fine. That's, that line type scale is definitely something that you will be kind of tweaking, particularly if, one of these drawings is a detail that's just looking at one small corner of this building rather than kind of the hidden line in a full building plan or a site plan or something. But yeah, so that is, I'm going to save this and I'm going to delete this because ultimately all we're really looking for is this, at least for this first stage, this stuff. The final kind of thing I'm going to add here is that another kind of template, this is called temple, so that I need to change to template. But another kind of template adjacent thing for you guys is what we discussed on Monday, the libraries. And so you can have kind of asset libraries where you have, like cutouts and maybe there's a scale figure here or some, furniture objects that you're commonly using. The way we would kind of bring those in and work on those, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to fully do the exercise, but just to show you how we would do that, we could go picture. And I've been working on this kebab project, so I could go to resources, entourage, and I have these 3 images. Basically, I could lock this picture that I've brought in, trace the outline of the person or the object, and then scale that down to a reasonable size and have kind of this library or family of different objects that that you can use for whatever projects you're working on. Obviously, I wouldn't, for the generic for you guys save as a template, I would not have something this specific. Like it would probably be a person walking or like a generic bed, generic couch, that kind of stuff. But just to give you an idea of how you will do that for this exercise. And then unlock. And that's, sorry. The last thing I'll kind of say is the other thing. So in addition to kind of getting these layers set up, getting these panels, it's also definitely worthwhile kind of figuring out for yourself what are your preferred like toggleable settings. So this first bar refers to the ways that you can select lines or objects and kind of what you can snap, where you can kind of snap them to. So these are the settings that I regularly use. Basically, I can snap to a midpoint. You see that mid selected. If there was a point, a random point in this model, it would snap to a point. So that means like when you get close, it kind of comes across and hits that with precision. for moving or drawing objects, I'm going to turn ortho off for a moment just so you can see this, but basically I can, if I get close on this, it will bring it to both, you know, perpendicular, because this point is perpendicular, but it's also the midpoint. So if I had midpoint off, it would still stop to that location because I have perp on. But again, I'm going to do midpoint back here. End is self-explanatory. It's the end of a line or the or a surface. And the only one, and tangent I don't have on, it's like a tangent of a circle just because I'm not using, you know, that's not something that is really important to my geometry usually. Sometimes I will do it for a specific project, but it's not in my kind of generic thing. The one thing I really want to warn you guys about is near. So near basically snaps to like whatever you're kind of closest to. This is a tool that when toggled on and not used precisely can lead to a lot of modeling and drawing errors. So you'll notice that like when this is off, it is snapping only to the midpoint or to the endpoints. With near, you know, yes, it still shows the midpoint, but if I get too far away to that, it still is kind of snapping, but it's just to a random closest point on the line. And so if you're modeling fast, that's often something that can screw you up, where you think you're at the midpoint, but you're actually at this other kind of random point. And so I almost never have this on. That's a personal preference thing, but I would like, you know, I would be wary of near. And so like, yeah, you know, because anyways, if say we wanted to like break this up and find some division that's not the center, you know, we could do that in a more precise way with the divide command. Where we can, you know, specify the number of sections. So say we want to break this up into 3, you know, we can then snap here because it's now the end rather than, you know, or the center or yeah. So that's just a warning for that one. And then finally, the project definitely wants to be toggled on if it's not already. This is what kind of locks things into. So now I like could not make I can move with the gumball, but I couldn't, because the gumball kind of breaks the rules a little bit, but I could not say make a vertical line while project is on. I could not extrude. I'm pretty sure I cannot extrude. I guess I can't extrude. I don't think I can. Basically, it makes it so when you're drawing, it in 2D it locks it to the C plane, like to the you know zero on the Z axis. The last few, and then we'll wrap this thing up, is grid snap. I have off. I don't, you know, it is this. I don't know. What the utility of this would be. It basically kind of only allows you to click in certain increments that you can set. Ortho I do have on, but ortho is something that, you know, for me, I'm just moving my mouse around. It locks me into the cardinal directions, but I can easily kind of toggle out of that by holding shift. The other option, if you prefer, is being able to, now I've turned ortho off, so I can move however I want all the time, but if I hold shift, it kind of temporarily puts me into ortho mode. I prefer to have this be the standard. An O snap, I believe, let's see. Oh snap. Oh, I guess oh snap is this menu. Um, yes. Okay. So oh snap is like what? So definitely have oh snap on because that allows you to kind of specify the different snapping principles you want to follow. And gumball, I like gumball. Um, I think it's a good way of quickly moving stuff in a more precise way than just a kind of drag and drop. But I know some people who don't like how kind of large it is visually. Um, and so you can also kind of turn that off and work by really kind of just militantly in a very precise way, like moving or rotating um, whenever you modify stuff. But I definitely use Gumball. But yeah, that's what I got. So your guys's uh, your templates should for this kind of generic early design should look like this with the option of having a couple scale figures or furniture pieces that you can also bring into your drawings. But yeah, save. I will change from temple to template in my folder, but that's all I got. Thanks, you guys.